welcome to, sorry about that, the Metroid Prime Randomizer Top 8 Tournament Match, Gunert versus Lane1. I'm Elias Thompson. I will be your commentator / tracker for this afternoon. Top 8. These are obviously two very top tier runners. Lane1 seated at number 1, Gunert seated at number 5. This is a losers bracket round, and so whoever loses here will be out of the bracket, and whoever wins will go on to face Op 82 in the second round of the losers bracket. It should be a fun race to see. Both of them know the game very well, and both of them know the randomizer very well. So I'd be curious to see where those artifacts are, where the route divergences take them, and hopefully will be a fun time to watch. As it happens, there are some gentlemen's agreements with this race. IS is allowed. IS is a glitch. It stands for infinite speed. Basically involves boost falling when your speed is so high it gets set to not a number in the game's code, allowing you to do all sorts of crazy things, like get all the items loaded at once. It's normally not allowed in these rules, but it can be done through a gentleman's agreement, as they have allowed, because it can work a little differently depending on where you're playing the randomizer. Both of our runners are off at this point. We're very likely going to be seeing them do space jump first, and hopefully no one falls while they do it. Both of them are able to get that ledge right away. It looks like we're going to be starting off with a Various suit, so that'll definitely be in the runner's mind as they look for their missiles and morphball items, because that Magmore elevator is right there, and it looks like that was a visor and landing site. I'm not sure if we saw which visor that was. I don't know if anyone took the chance to fully scan that to see. Chances are they will be back at landing site soon, hopefully with a morphball, and we'll be able to grab it sooner rather than later, and hopefully not forget about it. In case it happens to be X-Ray, and in case something like Omega Pirate, which is the only boss that actually hard requires X-Ray, is required in the game. So obviously not a lot of route diversions going on just yet. It's all within the first 2 minutes. They're both taking the elevator to Chozo here. They're going to get some eyes on about 3 items here. I believe that was a missile on top of that grapple ledge. Didn't see what was on top of the half pipe and on that ledge. Hard to say. Hard to see. Obligatory comments about the commentator stream, but very small items. They obviously are taking in that knowledge and going to route accordingly. Lane getting that slope jump to make that a little quicker, but does get a little stuck. Gunner jumping up the room the normal way there. So they're heading to what should be the first mini-boss of the game, Hive Mecha, where you're normally supposed to get missiles. And because of the way these rules are set up, it will either be missiles or something like Space Jump. Chances are you'll see both of these runners skip the boss with a nice little convenient scan dash, as it looks like the item is, in fact, French vanilla missiles, which they can use right away to check another item, which Lane finds first, just barely, is more missiles. So because they don't have Morph Ball yet, they can't progress forward, and they have to backtrack. There is one more check they can make on their way back to Main Plaza with their missiles. Usually that's something like Morph Ball, but it doesn't have to be. It could be something totally different, because with their missiles now, they can go back to Talon and check the missile doors and some checks there. And especially with super missiles now, which are sometimes required, sometimes not. It depends on where artifacts and the progression is. It's not required for the very end of the game, the final boss. But this does give them one more check on their way back, potentially to the Talon or Ruined Shrine area, which is up ahead in the main plaza. That tree, that big old tree, has a check there. And you need super missiles to get it. Lane, you're going to have to watch his health here. And it looks like that morph ball was up there in the half pipe or boost ball. And so we'll probably try to see Lane go look for space jump as soon as possible. Gunert, on the other hand, immediately going for this tree to spy what's in there. So some tiny route divergence here, although I imagine we'll just see some back and forth. So Gunert, the route divergence becomes no longer tiny. Going straight for Talon, Lane having checked Rune Shrine, not finding anything he liked to see. And looks like he'll be trying to check the tree here. And this will put Gunner in a little bit of a lead initially. As he gets an early lead to check both artifact hints as well as talent checks. So interesting way to see how just a little bit of micro routing decisions can affect early leads like that. So first we're going to see Gunert climb and go into Root Cave. Doesn't have a space jump, so he can't dash across it and check the upper items just yet, but he can check the one in the hallway, which I believe is Transfer Tunnel B. Usually some decent progression there because it's an early check that's just protected by missiles, albeit just slightly out of the way of the normal game flow. It is, however, in this case, just a missile, and so we'll probably see Gunert go straight for the ship, which Lane decided to go to first. And so now we see Lane in the lead, this rubber banding back and forth as we see them sort of just make these small decisions that probably at this point will not amount to much, but at the very least it does sort of showcase how whenever you make a bigger routing divergence later on, how that can really affect who wins and who doesn't. So Lane's about to check one item, which is in the middle of Artifact Temple here, and then get his scans in for the artifact hints. We might see him check immediately. We might not. Either way, it should be something interesting. All right, so looks like we have found the space jump boots. That'll be good to get that morph ball as Lane and soon here Gunert begins to scan them. And it looks like Lane has elected not to check the artifact hints immediately. Some runners do find that they like to just go through the normal progression, and then when they get to a major route divergence point, they then check to see what the artifacts are to inform which route to check and which one might have the most artifacts there. Although he does look like he's checking it now. So we've got Life Grove, Frigate Crash Site, Life Grove Tunnel, Observatory, Warrior Shrine, and I did not catch the sixth one. It looks like he didn't either. Gunert also checking the artifacts. Ventilation Shaft was the last one there. Well, okay, so all in all, not terrible locations. Life Grove and Life Grove Tunnel will mean boost balls required, which is good. You kind of want boost ball anyway to make one of the final bosses a lot faster, Meta Ridley. And so it looks like both of these runners at this point will start heading back to Chozo. Lane's going to check Root Cave because he skipped that, whereas Gunner will skip that, but then might check Warrior Shrine on the way. So despite runners being in different places at this point, both of them are still about equal. And considering they both chose to have that early knowledge, that might affect how they choose to maybe go down the same route later on. So it'll be curious to see. Ventilation Shaft, another artifact that's kind of in between mid and lower mines that does require either boost ball or x-ray. Hopefully they'll wait until they have boost ball. Lane here going for the out of bounds for Arbor Chamber without morph ball or bombs. It's a little risky, as you can sort of see him do, but he handles it pretty well, because you can get a little stuck there. Oh, but he is rewarded with bombs themselves. That is very interesting as gunert gets his morph ball in Chozo Ruins. So, wow, that is a little crazy. Logically speaking, that means plasma is going to have to show up early before it expects you to get bombs. It could be somewhere in Magmor, or it could be somewhere deeper in Chozo. But that is a very interesting place for bombs. I don't think I've seen that in these settings, although, as I sort of explained, it is entirely possible. Yeah, and because he also did a sort of scan-dash trick to get up there in the first place, X-ray visor, which we're pretty sure at this point, given that that is logically required at this point, is the visor and landing site, and grapple beam, which you normally need to do when you don't know how to do that dash, are probably going to be showing up pretty early if they find them. On the other hand, Gunner with his morph ball and no bombs is going deeper into Chozo, probably hoping to find them somewhere back there. Perhaps instead finding grapple or plasma. As Lane finally makes his way into Chozo Ruins with his slight bomb advantage, but also being a little behind. Gunner, though, will have to backtrack for those bombs as he starts to find the grapple beam. Gunner's going to do a quick check of what this item is. Missile expansion. Doesn't have to try and jump through murky acid, which is in logic in these settings. As Lane finishes up his sweep of Ruined Shrine. Gunner, not having power bombs or bombs, going to have to just bail out of there as Watery Hall contained no progression. And at this point, we might see him start to think about heading back to Talon without those bombs. But perhaps spying this item up here first. Seeing that it is, in fact, a missile. Going to regenerate some health. And plan his next move. Meanwhile, Lane, with his morph ball and bombs in tow, is going to go check the ruined gallery item, which is the route they took earlier. It's just that you need both morph ball and bombs to make the check. You can't even see it until you get it. And it's usually the one-off check where once you have bombs, you're not in the area anymore, and so you have to determine when or if you want to check that. Looks like Lane's going to do that now. Probably the best chance it's going to get. So he double checks the item in Rune Nursery. As Gunert begins his trek back, possibly checking Vault on the way here by climbing up to that. While I was looking at that, Lane has already checked the item I spoke about, and doesn't look like immediately it was anything there. One thing we know it can't be is plasma, because plasma was blocking those bombs to begin with. But it looks like both of these runners are taking different routes to get to the same place, the first Magmor elevator. Although Lane's probably going to check Vault since he has bombs first. And Gunner really going to hope that he finds bombs in here. Gunner, although I'm sure he is well aware, number of soft locks in Magmor Caverns without bombs. If he doesn't find it here in Lava Lake, he's going to have to turn back immediately because there is a bomb barrier which can be broken by power bombs. So if he does find power bombs up here, he'll be maybe able to move ahead depending on drop RNG or if they're main power bombs. Lane, however, will be able to essentially go smooth sailing through Magmor, electing to not dip into mid-Chozo. And there is that plasma beam. Now Gunnard is remembering Root Cave in Arbor Chamber. And it's just too much. You know, Link Force, I'm doing my best here, so I apologize if the tracking is a little slow. but I'm trying to stay on top of it. Lane, of course, also about to get his plasma beam, and he'll be able to just go straight through with that plasma beam and space jump, feeling a lot more confident about trying to find wave beam along the way to Fendrana. Hopefully finding it instead of having to backtrack to Chozo himself. Gunert begins his ascent back to Chozo, and while, again, it's pretty early in the randomizer, and no one is definitively in the lead or not in the lead, we will go ahead and switch audio to Lane, as he is in the best position to see the new checks that we have as we see the Norfair Depths / Magmore Caverns music arise in full force. So he's going to check over there, sees a power bomb. That's going to give him 1, but that counts as power bomb progression, and be very helpful for the one-off power bomb checks before he gets to the areas like Phazon Mines. Gunner, meanwhile, trying to book it as fast as he can back to Talon Overworld. It's interesting, too, because most people won't attempt that Arbor Chamber check, including myself, without bombs. And so that might have been something on the back of Gunnert's mind. Lane, however, took a risk in trying to do that out of bounds without bombs, succeeded and was rewarded greatly for it, as he gets his boost ball. So that does actually put him in a little bit of a lead, getting boost ball that earlier. He'll just be able to go naturally faster through a lot of the same rooms that Gunner won't be able to without it. Lane only needing Spider Ball for ball upgrades at this point. In addition to getting the 6 artifacts that we saw the hints for, what both of these runners will need is all 3 of the beams, Wave Beam, Ice Beam, and Plasma Beam, which they both have now, as well as Phazon Suit. They both have Various Suit at this point, which is what it's allowing Lane and previously Gunner to venture into Magmore. But Phazon Suit is required to beat the final boss. Gunner knowing exactly where to go and is going there, as Lane gets bullied by turrets and puffers. Checking Warrior Shrine and getting the artifact from it, which will be his first. Because he has that power bomb, very easily able to check underneath it, which is the Phazon Suit. And that is probably the most potential troll item to find, or have to find in a game, because it can almost be anywhere. And there's his Wave Beam, I think, as well. He's going to have to go farm another Power Bomb to go get it, since he only had the 1. If not Wave, it could have been Ice. It's a little difficult for me to tell. But that will be something he desperately wants and needs, and will take the time here to farm Power Bombs for and try to get. Gunner getting his bombs and going into Magmore Caverns through the middle way, as that's now the closest elevator. We could see them high-five here in a minute. I did not notice that. Thank you very much for pointing that out, Gunner. Also, taking a detour to the landing site to get that X-ray visor, confirming that that was definitely the logical path to Arbor Chamber in his mind. So Lane going a little too fast and messing up this puzzle. Gonna have to wait for it to respawn, but getting what's known in normal speedruns of this as Race Tank, which is normally an energy tank, but is now a 3rd suit for full damage reduction and free movement in water, as Lane decides to commit to going into Fendrana Drifts. In terms of go mode, it would seem like Ice Beam might be our go mode here. Boost Ball is what's required for most of those artifacts. Gravity technically required for Frigate Crash Site. And so, yes, it does appear that Ice Beam is our go mode at this point, knowing what we know from Lane. Gunnered on the way to get Boost Ball, presumably haven't gotten the Power Bombs on the way. Only taking some time to double check just how far from go mode he is. Yeah, for real. For real. I have got my work cut out for me here. So Lane potentially routing himself all the way to Observatory, and then determining whether he wants to double back at that point. But still going to have to look for Ice Beam, which could be past Observatory, deep into Pirate Labs coming up here, which does have an Ice Beam door up ahead. So you normally don't want to see that, but in this case, entirely possible. Gunnered about to get his Wave Beam. As Lane begins his sweep of front Fendrana here, in all likelihood getting missile after missile. It's worth noting that both of these runners only have 2 energy tanks, and so if they find Ice Beam too fast and commit to beating the game, hopefully they'll find some more energy tanks, because final bosses with just 2, no matter how much damage reduction you have, not particularly fun. These runners are good enough to where that if they, if they don't rush things too much, which is ironic to say in a race, they should be fine. But I suppose we'll see how much health they end up with by the time they actually do find Ice Beam. So Gunner getting his gravity suit and electing not to go into Fendrana. Doesn't have Phazon suit yet, so he's probably going to check that Warrior Shrine item as soon as possible. Gunner desperately looking for another power bomb to try and get that Phazon suit, as Lane decides to see if Chapel of the Elders is worth it at all. Doesn't look like he liked what he saw and is going to double back. And Lane will now be heading deeper into Fendrana after a quick missile check. Right as Gunnered finds and acquires the Phazon suit. Gunnered able to get another power bomb back a lot quicker this time, as it looks like now they might be climbing up to go deeper into Fendrana. More or less following the same route as Lane at this point. It's also worth noting, although it hasn't really come into play yet because of where bombs were, another gentleman's agreement setting that they both agreed to was no sun chamber. So that means that no progression can be found by fighting Flagra or fighting ghosts within the sun chamber room. So had bombs been deeper in mines, that's usually a decision people like to weigh, but they didn't have to weigh it, as that is completely disabled for progression in this case. Lane not finding what he wants in Phendrana Canyon or Ruined Courtyard. And we'll be most likely heading into labs at this point to get an artifact and check for a bad ice beam location in there. As gunert now also cleaning up the front of Phendrana here, potentially hot on Lane's heels if he decides to take a route divergence, because essentially their routes are synced at this point. Lane is pretty solidly in the lead until any gambles of route divergence happen, looking for that ice beam, if we see any. Lane getting bodied by the only visible shadow pirate in the game. Those of you who like to scan everything, that's your chance. He's going to be able to go through this pretty quickly, where you have to kill all 4 pirates. He's got the plasma beam. One shot on each of them, they burn to death. And he'll be able to make fairly quick work of his route through labs here, hoping to find ice beam along the way. It has, in fact, been silly fast. Perfect for someone who's commentating and tracking all by themselves. 100% scan rando race win. I'm down if you're down. So we're seeing gunert here make a lot of the same checks that Lane already has. Got to check that Chozo-Wise Temple just in case, as we see Lane going to check the Hydra item, which you normally need X-ray for to check on, but if you have supers, you can just blow it up and get it. In this case, looks like it was just a missile. Lane making very quick work of this observatory climb. He will have to get the item on top of it because it is an artifact. Hopefully he won't get bodied by those pirate shots. Looks like he handles it very, very well and continues through labs, hoping to find that ice beam. It is true. You'll notice by the very empty second-to-last column on the tracker, none of them have found any beam combos that are not super missiles, including, most importantly, Flamethrower, aka Validator. And so can either one of them really win? If neither gets it. I suppose we'll find out. Gunert finding out that Phendrana Canyon is not worth it, as Lane finds the same thing out about Control Tower. It's worth noting, even though he did it pretty quickly and pretty succinctly, Lane did skip a trigger at the very, very beginning of that room to initiate the pirate fight in there, which the fight itself, not horribly bad, a little slow, but what it does do is change a few layers in other rooms, specifically in Magmore. Just puts flying pirates everywhere. Very bad, but was able to skip it and save himself a lot of time and headache. Straight up murders Edward. And looks in Research Lab Aether, finding the ice beam and able to progress straight ahead through Research Core. Fellas, Lane1 is now in go mode, and we'll be looking to collect the rest of the artifacts as soon as possible. In all likelihood, we'll probably see him go straight up to this last elevator in Phendrana into mines, get the one artifact and ventilation shaft, exit the front of mines, go to Life Grove area, get a couple more there, and then end up right next to his ship in the frigate crash site to get his last artifact and then go beat the game, where he'll also be able to pick up the X-ray visor. So we'll see Lane maybe make a few more checks along that route, just looking for Thermal Visor to make the final boss a little faster. But for all intents and purposes, this is now Lane's race to lose. Worth noting, however, that gunert is more or less still following the same path, so he should be getting his Ice Beam soon. And as someone in chat brings out, it is logically required for Spider Ball to access Life Grove. And in fact, in order to access some parts of Phazon Mines, Spider is also required. Lane will technically be going into a point of no return area without Spider Ball. So that's largely going to depend on both of these runners' abilities, specifically Lane in this case, since he's in the lead, of if they are able to do stuff like spiderless shafts, which can be a huge hindrance and time sink if you're not able to consistently do that. Lane does seem to be committing, though, as gunert begins to climb Observatory, trying to get his second artifact. Lane taking advantage of a more or less recently discovered small little window through that powerbomb rubble, trying to get that zoomer back there to give him a powerbomb, which he so desperately needs to progress. Not having a whole lot of luck here. Taking that wall instead of shooting through. Finally able to get the death. But was it the right zoomer? It doesn't look like it. Meanwhile, it looks like gunert did not have a lot of luck climbing this room the quick way, and so he'll be doing the observatory puzzle to climb it safely. Which will make actually acquiring the item a little easier, but will sink more and more time into Lane's potential lead here, depending on how long he takes to find a powerbomb, which he's finally able to get and move along. So as of the third room Lane's about to enter here in Phazon Mines, it will be a point of no return with Spider Ball. Getting back to the elevator, not usually as much of an issue. The climb for PPC or Plasma, or excuse me, Phazon Processing Center, relatively simple compared to another room we'll have to climb later called Spiderless Shafts, which requires some a little more advanced tricks involving bomb space jumps. So we will see Lane here take some time, not only to farm power bombs, but try to make as many checks along the way. At this point, he should know that Spider Ball not really possible where he is right now, but perhaps looking for that thermal visor. Although electing to skip the PPC check. Looks like gunert also gets that trigger skip in Control Tower as he does the sequence break there, and will be rewarded handsomely with a missile as Lane delicately dances around his own trigger to try and grab the artifact in Ventilation Shaft before potentially going for Spiderless Shafts. Lane realizing he doesn't have a power bomb to open the grating, having to juggle his power bomb pickups very carefully, hoping to grab one off of these puffers, potentially realizing that the puffers might not be able to drop them, as the drop system here in Metroid Prime 1 is a little lacking compared to its successor. Is going to boost through all this damage, though. And farm for power bombs in the room behind. Finally able to get one. We'll be able to get that artifact here pretty quickly as Gunert finds their ice beam. And will now be rechecking artifacts to plan their route to the final boss, potentially weighing whether or not they're going to be looking for Spider Ball. It's worth noting that I think we entered go mode on lane side here before or right around the 30-minute mark. So if that's not a just seed, I don't know what is. He's going to be trying to skip this trigger around for this fight here. Not able to get it. It's a fairly skinny little tall jump you have to do around here. Not quite as consequential as the other trigger skip and control tower. The consequence here is basically having to fast missile this guy and permanently changing the layer of only this room. Not too much detrimental effect. You can still speed through it later on. Gunert, on the other hand, is making the same play, going straight for Phazon Mines. Doesn't spend nearly as much time trying to powerbomb that rubble there. Lane, hopefully knowing what's up ahead. Gonna take the time to kill all these. I believe they're called bomb. I actually can't remember what they're called. Anyone in chat can correct me, please let me know. But gonna make sure they don't get in his way. Very easily able to bomb space jump up the first part of that shaft. So he gets dangerously close to that enemy and very easily able to skip Spider Ball to get through Phazon Mines. Bomboos, yeah. For some reason, my mind was in Zelda land. I wanted to call them bomb shoes. Still looking for stuff like an energy tank. That'll bump him up to 3 as he starts to very quickly approach final bosses and potentially thermal visor. Hello, Ivan. How are you? Gunert, meanwhile, on his way to get his third artifact in Ventilation Shaft. It's worth noting that because they had Gravity Suit, Spider Ball theoretically still not required. They just would have had to go the long way around once they got the Ventilation Shaft item, which would have meant going back into Magmore, back to Talon, going through Frigate, or just doing the Frigate crash site climb and going in through the front that way. It's something we might see Gunert do if he's not as comfortable with spiderless shafts. Though theoretically, a frigate play is also not in logic until they find thermal visor. It does seem that that is what Gunert's going to do, knowing that spiderless shafts are up ahead, knowing he's probably not comfortable enough to do them. Is able to climb PPC more or less without Spider. Brawler making a good point in chat that this room as well is also a less consequential point of no return for Spider Ball, as we brought up before. And so I believe there's no way around a spider being a logical requirement for that ventilation shaft item. Both of these runners, though, able to climb out of that room no problem. We get a little bit of elevator sync here as Lane leaves phase-on mines through the front and gunert leaves phase-on mines through the back. Lane very quickly going to get a 1-2 artifact here in Life Grove Tunnel and Life Grove. And then we'll head to the starting area to get his last artifact and beat the game. Gunert did, in fact, get that third artifact. I just forgot to track it. It's worth noting that because Gunert is taking an alternate route to get to where Lane is now, going to have the option to make perhaps a couple more checks along the way. One of them being the geothermal core here. However, it does take a while to check, and perhaps rightfully so, skipping that one as Lane gets his fourth artifact in Life Grove Tunnel. And probably not much else in terms of checks along the way. So that advantage for Gunert not panning out. Although I can see Gunert maybe also checking antechamber as well, which Lane might check as well on his way out. So again, probably Lane's race to lose at this point. So unless thermal visor is in a place like antechamber, it's very likely that we will not see thermal visor in play at this point. Lane getting his fifth artifact as he speeds his way to Frigate Crash Site, Landing Site, and then Impact Crater. Does take the time to check Great Tree Chamber and is rewarded with yet another energy tank. So Lane getting a decent amount of energy tanks here that Gunert does not yet have. Safety saving at his ship before going on these last three artifacts, hunting them down as Lane cuts through Chozo very quickly to get to Frigate Crash Site. Gunert technically going to get the artifact Lane doesn't have right now, having that gravity suit and able to just jump to it on his way there. Lane, however, electing not to check antechamber for thermal. We will see Gunert make the crash site climb with relative ease, because ain't nobody got time for Sunken Frigate. Is able to get yet another energy tank, and we will see a high five from them here really quickly in this room. High five. This Lane is going to get yet another energy tank, making him be able to be pretty fast and a lot more careless during the final boss fight as he gets his last and final artifact. Doing the pro backwards strat, but missing the mark a little bit. Points for trying. Gunner is checking antechamber here, which unfortunately is not thermal visor, so that only adds to Lane's lead. So we're seeing Lane speed off to his ship here, grab that X-ray visor that he had put off for so long, make a ship save, refill his ammo and health, and head to the 2 final bosses of the video game. Very nice R-scan dash all the way up to Artifact Temple there. As Gunert begins to approach Life Grove Tunnel to get his last 2 artifacts. So as Lane enters Artifact Temple and triggering the Meta Ridley fights, what this will boil down to are 2 phases. The first phase of which will be cut in time significantly. Lane's going to let off a couple of plasma charge shots to stagger him. Hopefully try to get a frame-perfect trick called Flyby Skip, which he is not able to get. As Ridley begins his flyby, right after this, Ridley will land. Lane will in all likelihood then boost into Ridley's chest, and because the first phase of the Ridley fight is for some reason not immune to boost ball damage, which does 50,000 damage per frame in a 60 frame per second game, Ridley's health will instantly drop to his second phase cap, and from then he will alternate charge shots and fast missiles to quickly drain his second phase. Just like that, his health is so low, as Gunert gets his last and final artifact. Ridley does line up for a charge there, so he did have to break lock to try and manually aim, and he is able to block it. And for style, lets off a super missile to get the final shot on a now permanently dead, never to return Meta Ridley. Meanwhile, Gunner going to take the same path back after checking Great Tree Chamber here for his, in all likelihood, final E-Tank, which he is not going to get as he makes his way to Artifact Temple, while Lane makes his way to Impact Crater. Yeah, you'd think if Ridley learned at this point to just keep his mouth shut and his chest well protected, he'd be in good shape, but alas. It seems Lane will be taking another safety save down here in Impact Crater. Maybe not as confident during the Exo fight without some of these beam combos. Also knowing that he only has still 1 power bomb. And so if he doesn't have good luck avoiding these fission Metroids, that could be a little bit of a time sink for him. Is able to get the slope jump, though, right out the gate. So we'll probably be in good shape to avoid them here. But during the Essence fights, it will mean he'll have to make use a little bit more of that phase-on beam. Ooh. 1 Metroid went for it, missed. Is able to get an Impact Core pretty aptly, though, and will trigger the final boss fight, Metroid Prime. Who would have thought? This first phase is divided up into 4 subphases in 4 individual rooms. The first one, Metroid Prime is weak only to 1 type of beam damage at a time. The exception being, he's weak to Flamethrower for some reason during the power phase, but that will not apply in this situation. Lane quickly able to get rid of that first little micro phase where he's weak to power. He will then switch to being weak to Wave Beam. Wave Beam, while it does home in on the weak point there, does tend to do the least amount of DPS overall. And so it's typically the phase you want to avoid here. This Subchamber 1, Metroid Prime does that twice before burrowing down. He'll burn down into Subchamber 2, well, he will do the same thing, but with 3 different beam weaknesses instead of 2, with Ice Beam being thrown into the mix. The next Subchamber will be all 4, with Plasma Beam being thrown into the mix. And the 4th Subchamber will also be weak to all 4, but there's a lot more RNG thrown in there. such as he can change his weakness at will, he can enter super fast mode, he can randomly charge you. All sorts of fun things as Lane sets himself up for this AI manipulation, tries to get the snipes when he can, and not getting that one as gunert begins his Meta Ridley fight. Also worth noting, Metroid Prime, while obviously highly mutated, is still technically a Metroid, and so is programmed with a slight weakness to Ice Beam, despite the fact that overall, the Plasma phase is the one you want. All in all, assuming that Lane doesn't die here, I think what the determining factor in this race came down to was Lane's early play to get bombs in Arbor Chamber, doing that wall crawl without bombs to get the bombs, as well as his ability to be able to do spiderless shafts and not having to go all the way around like gunert did. Lane is able to get a snipe there. Towards the end of that charge, he opens his mask just a little bit to allow him to still be weak to the phase that he was just there for, and then as he turns around, it's the same thing. Gunert able to also quickly destroy Meta Ridley as he makes his way to Impact Crater, as Lane tries to finish up Subchamber 3 here so he can get to the last RNG-filled fun phase of Metroid Prime Exoskeleton, aka Giant Metroid Crab. A little bit of cutscene sync here as gunert transitions to Impact Crater and Lane transitions to Subchamber 4. Lane trying his best to trigger the AI manipulation to get close enough to trigger his melee attack 9 times out of 10. But obviously it doesn't quite work out there as Metroid Prime decided to charge anyway. Does have a plasma phase though, so is able to do a lot of snipe damage, as Metroid Prime has now determined it should go very, very fast. Gunert also electing to climb Impact Core the intended way, perhaps not comfortable with that slope jump at the front. Able to get through Impact Core without using a power bomb as well, as he begins the Exo fight right around the time Lane starts to wrap it up. Lane gonna have one more little micro phase here to try and do as much damage as possible before he will defeat the exoskeleton and move on to the final boss, Metroid Prime Essence, where it sheds its crab-like form and takes on a more traditional Phazon-y Metroid tentacly appearance. Unfortunately, because of how fast you have to skip this cutscene, we will not be hearing music at all for the final battle, as the music trigger is later in that cutscene. So we see Lane, although he got pushed back a little bit, for the most part doing this AI manipulation of standing completely still while Essence does his first few attacks to make sure that he lays his pool, his Phazon pool, somewhere that's decent. The way this fight will work is Lane will use this Phazon Pool to use his Phazon Suit, Phazon Beam to try and potentially do attack cancels here. Not doing them at the get-go because he was pretty close to that exoskeleton carcass. And if Metroid Prime is too close to that carcass, he will just decide to transition to another visor. The next one will be thermal, by the way, so it will be invisible, and not lay a Phazon Pool, which you need to kill it. Is able to get a number of attack cancels there, though. And so, while he has a pull, he will not be able to see exactly where Prime is. Could use the scan visor if he wants to try and get a general idea, as well as that attack radius origin point, but for the most part, he'll just have to shoot and hope he hits it, and then keep shooting in the same place. Doesn't look like he's able to find it this time, so they'll just wait out this phase until he hopefully lays another pool and enters the combat visor phase. A lot of phases and sub-phases in this final fight. Gets that pull. And goes for the attack cancels here. Try and get through this particular phase as quickly as possible so that he can trigger the X-ray and then potentially do a pull cancel to finish things out. Using his one power bomb to get rid of those Hunter Metroids. And it looks like he's going for a pull cancel, just going in and out of the pool a whole lot to try and get the most out of the single Phazon pool, hoping he won't need another one. And just like that, kids, Lane1 has finished and won with an official racetime.gg time of, wait for it, 55:43. And we are now joined by Lane as gunert has decided to forfeit. Lane, GG.
That was a weird seed.
I think I would agree with that. What, in your opinion, was probably the weirdest part?
Hello. Ugh.
By gunert at this point. Hello, gunert.
Dang it, Lane. I thought I might have had you, but should have done better.
We were just about to discuss how weird the seed was and what you guys thought the weirdest part of it might have been.
Ugh. Yeah, I'm not sure. The routing was certainly a little unusual. Very straightforward, for sure.
Yeah, it's worth noting that for the most part, you guys took more or less the same route. One thing that gave Lane an advantage early on was that he did the Arbor Chamber Secret World without bombs and was rewarded with bombs.
Yeah, I had a feeling that might come into play, but...
And then later on, he was also able to do spiderless shafts to take a quicker route to Life Grove, where you had to go all the way around.
Man. Both the things I was afraid of would come into play came into play. That's unfortunate, but...
Spider was in the workstation.
That is...
and I decided not to get it.
Yeah, it looks like both of you peeked into it. I couldn't quite see what it was. It doesn't look like anyone in chat might have caught it as well, though maybe they did. I have a slightly harder time seeing specific items.
I didn't bother looking at workstation because by that point I was already in go mode.
Yeah. So, fun seed. Very, very jet. Even if gunert hadn't forfeited, probably would have finished under an hour.
Yeah, probably.
But, yeah. Very, very linear for the most part, it would seem. Do you guys regret or not regret agreeing to the gentlemen's agreements, which didn't look like any of them came into play at this
No, I think they were fine. Honestly, I prefer having not having Flogger, because Flogger is such a dumb time sink.
Yeah.
So I think that was fine. This just happened to be a case where there were a couple things that Lane could do confidently that I couldn't that came into play, and that no one's at fault for that. It just happens. So I can't say I'm too upset with how this turned out.
Yeah. While for this particular tournament, only very trivial tricks are turned on. By no means, aside from the things that are explicitly banned, are any and all tricks allowed. And that's where I think this top 8 bracket really came into shape. A lot of the people who are here are able to do a lot of those tricks and be somewhat quick about it in determining their routing decisions. So unfortunately, since this was a loser's bracket match, that will mean that Gunert, you are the weakest link. Not literally, but...
Well, I mean, Link's already gone, so...
Yeah,
no, honestly, I made it further than I ever imagined I could, so I'm not super upset. Plus, I mean, I am racing against the initial top 2 seed of the tournament, so
yeah.
This was kind of expected, and I came in with the expectation that there wasn't much of a chance of me pulling through. And I'd say I put on a pretty good show, all things considered. I mean, I was only probably 3 minutes behind-ish.
A little behind for the most part, yeah.
Yeah, so honestly, I think I did well, or as well as I could have, so I have no reason to be upset about this. And like I said, I made it further than I thought I could to begin with, so...
Yeah, you guys both did very well in this race, and in the tournament thus far in particular, obviously. Lane, this will mean that you now advance to face Op 82 in the second round of the losers bracket. Any final thoughts from I guess either one of your ends on either the race or how things might progress forward?
I never had a super unlucky Civil War. I kept getting constant dashes.
Yeah, that subchamber 4, it's always a coin toss, and sometimes it's always tails.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I don't have much to say other than, GG's Lane. Good luck with the rest of your losers bracket.
GG.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Well, unless either of you have any more final comments, that will do it for this very quick race for the Metroid Prime Randomizer Top 8 bracket tournament that we have going on. I believe the next scheduled race is... it's myself versus Digglerath this Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. No fancy GA like these two, and then we'll have another one scheduled shortly thereafter with the remaining 2 matchups: Inner Slice versus Uncle Reggie up there in the semifinals in the winners bracket, and Up now versus Lane coming soon. So yes, that will do it. Be sure to follow both of these runners, by the way. As you have just seen, they are exceptionally good Prime players and Prime Randomizer players. So be sure to give them both a follow with the links there in chat. And I think that's going to do it for us today. So
Have a good night, everyone. GG's.
Thank you all for watching. Thank you both for racing.
Thank you for
Have a good
coming.
day.
Thanks for coming.